Okay, we are recording.
Okay, so everybody, if you haven't, go ahead and print off all of your handouts that I emailed to you. The first handout that you have is for all 4 components. It's just a list of things that you think that you thought was helpful that you hear today, or something that you want to try in your program. So just keep handout 3 handy for all of the day. And then you will have handouts on alphabetics, fluency, and comprehension, and everything else, but you don't have a handout on vocabulary instruction. Um, I think because it's a little bit more, it has a lot meatier, chunkier stuff in the resources. So you don't have a handout on vocabulary, which is unfortunate because I love the vocabulary instruction model. So we're going to start with vocabulary instruction first, which should be the next slide. Okay. So there were some good questions and comments from everyone on what they observed or thought about when doing the vocabulary instruction. Vocabulary instruction is based on tier 2 words, not the tier 1 words. Although you may have a few students who maybe are at basic phonics who have just touched into the intermediate level, who also may need a few life skill words from tier 1. But hopefully there are not too many of those in your intermediate classes. Why tier 2 words? Because first of all, those are the most common words that you're going to see across academic areas, across jobs, than tier 1 or tier 3. Some people had questions about why we don't use the tier 3. Those are more attuned to specific jobs. Like tier 3 words would be words that a nurse would need to know, or what a welder would need to know. Now, there are a few tier 3 questions on GED tests. So yes, you will run across them, but really for STAR at the intermediate level, we want to focus on tier 2 words because they need those the most, because there's thousands of them. So we need to expose them to more vocabulary. And so explicit instruction in vocabulary includes both the breadth of vocabulary and the depth of vocabulary. So what we want to do is to talk about the evidence-based instruction process. And this is a feedback from everyone. Every time you guys got on those modules, it keeps on asking you, how do you know you are using an evidence-based instruction routine? So can someone tell me what are the steps for explicit instruction for vocabulary? Alicia, you're muted. I see you talking, but you're muted.
Okay. Explaining, modeling, guided practice, and application.
That's right. That's right. And that's going to be the same for all of that. And in the modules, we want to see you use those kind of STAR words when you're explaining stuff. We want to make sure that you're using explicit instruction for all of the categories. So I love vocabulary, and I sent all of you guys in October some copies of the vocabulary units that I use. So for me, how I set it up is that on the first day, I give them a knowledge rating scale. which you guys also have in your resources tab. The purpose of the knowledge rating scale is to constantly monitor and observe their progress in vocabulary, but they need to know it. They need to know how they are doing, not just the teacher. They need to be able to self-assess. So I always start with that knowledge rating scale, because on day one, you ask them, I've never heard this word. Yes, I've heard this word, but I don't know what it means. Yeah, I know this word. It has something to do with, or yes, I know this word. And so the ultimate goal of vocabulary instruction is to move from the left of that paper over to the right as the week goes on. And they can see it. So it sort of self-empowers them on how they're doing vocabulary. So on the first day after the knowledge rating scale, I always do the definition. And I have them manually write the definition down instead of having it typed up. And that came from an observation from one of my coaches. When I was going through STAR, they talked about how it helps with memory retention if your students have to write it. So from that point on, I always had them write the definitions down. So I give them one definition, and that is the definition we use. And can someone tell me why STAR goes that way? Why do we just use the one definition? No takers? Okay, I'm going to have a little sidebar here. So now I teach 6th graders and 8th graders. And sometimes I have to bribe them, you know. It's like, okay, if I get an answer from this, you get 2 minutes off of this. But the reason that we give one definition is because there has to be a universal discussion on what you're doing in vocabulary. And so you don't just have them go to the dictionary and look up definitions. You go to the dictionary and you open up the definition for sanctuary. There could be 5 to 6 definitions, and maybe 15 people use different definitions. And how are you going to have a common conversation on what vocabulary is that week? So you give them the one definition that you're going to work on, but you can explain to them that, you know, there are many other definitions, and we might run across a few others as you go along, but we're going to start at this base with this one definition. And then typically on the first day, I give them thinking prompts on coming up with a sentence together as the whole group. Now, some of you put in your observations or your comments about the I do, we do, you do. So for that kind of instruction, that's definitely the we do, right? Where as a whole group, you discuss what sentence can you put with this definition. Typically, I have 2 to 3 other sentence examples for them to write throughout the week. But for that first day, that's what we do. Do what? Okay, so throughout the next 3 days, we do fill in the blank, sentence completion. One that I really love is who needs to know this? And this is where you can give them a little excerpt on how would a nurse need to know this? Or how would a veterinarian need to know these words? And that way, you can also be connected to your career pathways by having them do that activity. Plus, it encodes writing into your vocabulary instruction, which is also always nice. And then on the last days, you give them sentence examples and read and respond. So this takes them through the least difficult, which is the first day, moving them to a little bit more difficult of like fill in the blank or sentence completion. And then on the third and fourth days, you move to the most difficult activities of the yes, no, why, and the read and respond. How many people have been, can people chip in now and tell me what you've been doing with your vocabulary instruction or what you would like to try with your vocabulary instruction?
I like your, excuse me, I'm going to start trying the Who Needs to Know This. I like that. It's a good addition, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I did it with Seaboard this summer. Sometimes your answers are very explicit. It's like, man, I did not need to know that much about what Seaboard does, but okay. But yeah, no, it is actually really interesting to get that kind of viewpoint from your adults. Okay, what else? What else have other people tried?
I like to make those like those vocabulary quadrant charts where you have like the 4 boxes, you kind of have like your word, the definition, kind of what you were saying about, bringing it back to like a job or a pathway, but we kind of just put it on paper. So kind of to create like a visual aid for the student as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love those vocabulary quadrants. And the reason is that within any given class, as a teacher, you all know how hard it is for some really smart students to, not smart, but for more advanced in the English class that you're doing, to be done like this. And then you've got the other ones who are having troubles, who are struggling, and they're much slower. And then those few students say, I'm done. What do I do now? And then it kind of embarrasses your less advanced students in English at that point than other ones. So what I like to do is I like to give them that vocabulary quadrant. And if they get done with the assignment that I have, if it takes them just 5 minutes for doing the sentence completion, then they go back on their own and they complete sentences 2 and 3 in the vocab quad. I also like them to do the family words. Has anyone tried family words? So family words are not the same as synonyms or antonyms. Family words are where you use the root word and then you go to, I only let them use the Merriam-Webster dictionary. You go to the Merriam-Webster dictionary and they look for all of the words that have that same root word and they have to write that down. And to me, that was a real light bulb moment because you teach them 5 to 10 vocabulary words a week. And then when you add those family words, you can say from this one word, you have learned an additional 9 family words. Now, you may not understand completely the entire context in which it's being used, but you know that root word. And so you can participate in the conversation or you can follow that text much more thoroughly. That was a real light bulb moment for me, being able to use family words. Plus, it correlates really well with alphabetics. So I love to do that with vocabulary. So I know it's a real struggle for people to try to keep students engaged and active with vocabulary, but really and truly, your students are going to love vocabulary. And you have to actually be very careful of your time to make sure that you don't go over, I do like 30 minutes the first day, and the days after that, it's just 25 minutes because they will hijack that and they will spend a lot of time on vocabulary. So how much time are you guys spending on your vocabulary lessons?
Depending on the discussion.
You guys can put
on
these
the
in
discussions that come up, but generally at least 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's good. Felicia, that's a really good observation. She likes having the students use a new word in a context relevant to them. Oh, that's a really good idea. I might steal that one. Okay, but with that being said, if you follow those types of processes where you are doing what STAR recommends was like fill in the blank, sentence examples, sentence completion, who needs to know this, the yes, no, why, and the read and respond, you're going to give them a good, solid vocabulary instruction for that week. Yeah, 20 minutes is good. I just always found it difficult for just that first day because I do the knowledge rating scale and those first definitions. I find it really hard to get under 20 minutes, but for the rest of the days, 20 minutes is really good. Depending on your class, you can choose like just 5 vocabulary words a week. That free resource that's in your resource tab, they separate them by five words a week. And have any of you guys looked at that resource tab for vocabulary? Within the one that they have, they also have a little bitty QR barcode scan so that your students can individually practice on their phone the words that they have had that week. So especially if they don't have internet, this is a nice little thing for them to be able to practice and study with at home, is that little barcode scanner in your free vocabulary units in your resources tab. I like that. That was a good addition. Although a word of caution, I might have you make sure that depending on your group, have them set up that first Quizlet with you, because it will ask them to pay. And so you have to be sure and make sure that they're taking the free one. Just the word of caution. Just if you use that little barcode scanner, make sure that they're not doing the one that they have to pay for. Okay, so some of the other things that people have used, which is kind of interesting, is a vocabulary chain, where for review, you have different flashcards. And the first one says, I'm looking for the definition of a large amount of land extended out into the water. And then someone will say, oh, that's promontory. So they say, oh, I have that one. It's promontory. And then they're saying, I'm looking for someone who has the definition for a shiny, varying rate of colors. Oh, that's iridescent. And so you go around the room and everyone can participate in this vocabulary chain. I try to set up the vocabulary chain with different colors of cardstock, so that as the teacher, I can keep clear on which set of definitions or sentence examples I'm using. I learned that the hard way. So if you're going to do the vocabulary chain, try to set up each round, and just 2 rounds is plenty for a week to keep track of which words you're using. Has anybody done that before, the vocabulary chain with flashcards? It's kind of fun. I mean, it's just another way to give them practice. So, and it doesn't take too long. So these suggestions are not the main thing, but just to give them practice in a different way. It takes like maybe 10 minutes tops. One thing that I always found helpful with ESL classes was to do audio visual supports. And this literally takes about 1 or 2 minutes. On the second day, before they start with their fill in the blank, now this does take some teacher prep time. I just look for images of those words. Bless you. So for like ethical, I Googled, science for ethical, And I just got a sign that said right way and wrong way, right or wrong choices. For Sanctuary, I just did a little video clip of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame, when Quasimodo swings down and picks up the girl. I can't remember her name. And then he's up on top of Notre Dame saying, "Sanctuary, sanctuary." So anyway, it's a good way to engage and capture their attention. It's just little images or short little audio or video clips to support that definition. Another thing that has worked is having the students physically get up if you have some active people, or if they just learn better physically, is to put post-it papers, the big ones, the easel pads that you can tape around your room, or if you have access even down the hallway, and have them write second sentences on those easels. And that way they can get up, go write it, go right on the next one, go right on the next one. So it just gives them a little bit of a break, especially if you have students who have been, up since 4:30 in the morning working, and then they sit down for 2 hours from 6 to 8 o'clock at night. You might need something a little bit more physical to grab their attention more. One other thing that is a nice little break for physical is a dictation game. And this does require a hallway where you have one person record the definition, and the other students have to go to the end of the hallway and try to memorize the definition. And then they have to come back and tell the recorder what they heard. And they may only get like 2 or 3 words. And so, the next person will go and get the next 2 or 3 words, and then the next person, the next 2 or 3 words. So that's always a nice little fun break for students as well, to get them physically moving and to wake them up if it's an evening class. And then one thing that I have great difficulty doing, which is why I really like STAR, is that they will pull in your old vocabulary words from past weeks into this week's vocabulary word questions. Sometimes I can do that myself, but a lot of your vocabulary units already do that for you, which is just great because it helps with that memory and giving them numerous opportunities to practice that word. Okay, so those were some of the examples or different types that I have used. One other quick one that you can use is if you have access to those little mini erase boards. You can do fill in the blank questions as the teacher, and they write down the word and hold it up. And if it's right, they can put it down. That's also a little quick one that you can do with students. Okay, any feedback from anyone else? Esmeralda, thank you, Felicia. That's right. Esmeralda is the girl in the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yeah. So Felicia says that she only has about an hour to devote to vocabulary, and it doesn't feel like enough, an hour a week. So I don't know if this is fair, but one thing that you might want to consider is just giving them more homework assignments, like have them take a little card, a little 4x6 card, and have them record every time they hear the vocabulary words for that week out in the community. And it really surprises them. They're always like, I was listening to the radio and I heard this word, or I was at Walmart and I saw this word. So a little journaling activity is a good one for them to do. And then if you give them a physical vocabulary packet, you can assign them some of those second sentences, third sentences, or sentence examples on their own. The one that I would not do alone or in homework is, obviously the first day, but also the read and respond. I would definitely keep the read and respond because it's the most difficult in class. Okay.
Are you ready
So
for the next slide?
I don't know. What is the next slide? Good question.
The questions,
can't even-
issues, suggestions, and ideas?
Yeah, that's what we've been doing. Sorry.
I thought so, but I didn't want to interrupt you. Rolling. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's look at this first scenario, but I don't think you have this in your handout, do you? You don't have a vocabulary scenario in your handout.
Yeah, we do. It's the
Oh,
second
okay. There it
page.
is. There it is. Page 2. Okay. Okay. So Jamie assessed all his students using the word meaning test, and all but one student scored at an intermediate level. One of the students scored much higher, above grade levels 4 through 8. But Jamie feels that the review won't hurt him. Jamie, I'm sorry, gotta shut my door.
Wow. Here, I'll take over. Jamie selects 10 tier 2 vocabulary words. He teaches the words by telling all the different meanings for each word, providing a context for each word, and then giving a prompt to help the students come up with a context for each word. Jamie posts vocabulary words and asks the students to use the words when talking about comprehension texts throughout the week. He also has the students play hangman and complete a word search with vocabulary words and finishes the week with a quiz over the words. What are the strengths of the instruction in this scenario?
And you can go ahead and pull up that next slide if you could. So what does everyone think are the weakness of this instruction?
The multiple definition situation.
What do you mean?
It says that he tells all the different meanings for each word, which you can do, but I think that first you should make it clear, a common definition like you were saying.
Yes, that's very good. So teaching more than one meaning of a word at a time is detrimental. Start off with one of the words, and then as you get to the end of the week, they might be exposed to a few of the other meanings, but don't teach them a wide variety because it negates conversation on that word. And they also feel kind of overwhelmed if they're trying to understand 5 definitions at the same time. Okay, that's very good. What else is a weakness of this vocabulary?
He's having the higher scored people work at the same group as the others.
Yeah, it's not doing that more advanced student any good at all. STAR is designed for 4 through 8 grade levels, and you need to challenge, if they've moved beyond the 8th grade, then you need to challenge them with more advanced vocabulary work. So very good. That is definitely a weakness. What else? What does hangman and word search do for understanding of vocabulary words? Yeah, nothing at all. It doesn't help them focus on meaning at all. How much exposure is he providing for the new words? How much exposure is he providing?
Not a lot. And like he also doesn't really have them like physically write anything down, you know, he just kind of like talks about it and then he wants them to talk about it, but we don't really have like the application piece maybe of
Yes.
actually writing.
Absolutely. I mean, he posts the vocabulary words, but that doesn't really give them any practice in really applying that. So remember with STAR, we always want to make sure we're doing the explicit instruction, all four parts of the explicit instruction. Okay. So if it were you on the right side of that paper, how would you strengthen his vocabulary instruction?
He should have the students use the words in application, apply it into sentences, into writing, into actually being comfortable using the words, probably maybe even speaking activities where they use the words in context.
Yes, very good. Apply that and apply that throughout, not just one or two times. So yeah, the words on the wall and then having a quiz at the end doesn't let them apply that. And that's really good for CCR standards too, right? Because part of the whole purpose of CCR is in-depth, numerous opportunities. So that's also good for CCR. Okay. Any other suggestions?
I think writing down the vocabulary words at the beginning, like having them write them down, as well as just having that one definition again per word, like we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And having to apply it in different ways that makes them think instead of just having that spoon fed to them. Absolutely. Very good. Okay, shall we do vocabulary scenario number 2? Would someone like to read this one?
Felicia can.
Okay, thanks, Felicia.
Anne chooses 10 Tier 2 vocabulary words for the week's instruction. Her ESOL students enjoy using the dictionary, so she has them look the words up in a good ESOL dictionary and write each word in a sentence. Later, they talk about the vocabulary words when discussing.
Felicia, you just muted yourself.
Sorry about that. I don't even know how I did it. The next day, the class works together to make a quadrant chart for each word. After reading newspaper articles for current events, the students are asked to use the vocabulary words to discuss the articles. They are encouraged to look for the vocabulary words outside of class and report any sightings. The third day, they do a fill in the paragraph with the vocabulary words and do a yes, no, why together as a class. Again, they use the vocabulary words to discuss their comprehension reading. The next day, they have a test over the words and several review words.
All right. Okay, so what do you think are some of the strengths of Anne's instruction?
I like how she makes them look around for it and use the words in discussions, makes it applicable.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple avenues of recognizing the words and seeing them and using them.
Yep. Very good.
She carries it over into the comprehension lesson as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's really hard. I really admire that one. That's hard because you use the vocabulary words just to ask a question about anything that they're reading. So you have to individually think of those questions using vocabulary words. That's a good one. Okay. So what do you think are some of the weaknesses of this instruction?
The multiple
It's the-
definitions of the word. Since they're looking
Uh,
up the words in the dictionary, she can't be sure which definition they're finding.
Right. Yeah. Just don't do that. What about how does she know where they stand? Those first 10 modules we did, what were they based on? They were based on assessments, right? She didn't assess her students. So how do we know where they stand? You know, if they're more advanced, maybe they could have 10 words, but if they're not, then maybe they only need 5 words. All right. So how would you strengthen Anne's instruction? If it were you as a teacher, how would you strengthen this? Kitty cat.
Definitely need to assess them first and put them into groups based on that before she even
Okay.
starts.
So the fill in the paragraph one, maybe pare that down. Unless the paragraph really works together, that seems kind of tricky, especially for
Yeah.
10 words.
Yeah. Woo. That would take a long time, wouldn't it? That might take a whole hour just for that, depending. But yeah. Okay, and then did someone mention the whole thing about the what should she do instead of the ESOL dictionary?
Give the students like the definition, like the modeling piece, so that they
Yep.
know what definition you want them to use.
Absolutely. All right. Very good. Okay. I'm just going to look real quickly from comments from people. Maybe if I didn't lose it. Comprehension. No, I'm just going to ask you guys. So what are your comments or observations on vocabulary at this point? Yeah, ESOL is kind of an old word. I mean, we wouldn't use that anymore, but
Just comments, teaching vocabulary is a grind. It's, you don't, it takes a lot of time and effort, and I don't know. I think there's better uses of time than doing explicit instruction on vocabulary. That's why I like to keep explicit instruction short. But that's just,
explicit instruction as far as just the one day, or do you still do 20 minutes per day?
I don't teach right now, but
Or hypothetically, as you're imagining?
hypothetically, yeah. 20 minutes of explicit instruction per day would be a decent amount of time.
Right, and it definitely should not be the teacher 20 minutes of explicit instruction. That's only the first day. You know, on those second, third, and fourth days, it definitely should be an active process in which you, the teacher, are modeling a few words. You're going from group to group and helping, giving them that guided practice and application. So the reason that we do vocabulary, of course, is that it does affect comprehension. And that is our ultimate goal, is comprehension. And if they don't have that breadth and depth of vocabulary, we will not advance them up into comprehension. It impedes growth and comprehension. I agree with you. You know, it's that first day of vocabulary instruction is a grind, because you're up there at the board. For me, I could never get below 30 minutes. I don't know why.
I think one of the things, I don't know if it was you or not, Anita, who mentioned it, but the idea about, a homework assignment of having people pick out words they hear on the radio or words they hear at Walmart, or just common language, everyday use, that helps, I think, people, they recognize that they start to tune in to certain words. And so, where they see it in the newspaper, whatever the medium is, Facebook even. But I think that helps people to, grasp it as being real.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. A good reflection on that as well.
So this may be kind of a confession, but I do use word games like Hangman. I've got a group of 10, 16, and 17-year-old students, and we meet for 4 hours twice a week. And so by the time I get to vocabulary, I've totally lost them. Their attention is gone and elsewhere. And so some sort of game with the words helps us to regroup. So I think sometimes, while it may not have the most backing as far as research is concerned, we're also teaching like real people. And for my students, anything I can do to kind of break up just the monotony of class is a helpful thing. So I can't even have their attention unless we do something like that.
Yeah, and definitely with 16, 17-year-olds, you might incorporate some of those other ones, like using the little Quizlets because they love their cell phones, and the dictation and the getting up and moving around. Yeah, Felicia, you can't have people, no matter what their age, sit down for 4 hours. Just as long as that Hangman is connected to some sort of context, like the introduction before you go into the guided practice or application. Yeah, you're the teacher. You know best for your students.
So I have a lot of teenage boys and they really like the game Kahoot. So like I'll do the vocabulary words through that and they love that. So that's an idea.
Yeah, that's a good one. I use Blooket too. And I just post vocabulary words from 2 to 3 weeks. And they like that one too. Is everybody familiar with that, with Kahoot and Blooket? They're free. Free is good. So yeah, just go online and you can find free. All right, very good. I think we are ready to move on to the alphabetics instruction. So get out your handout 4 for alphabetics instruction. So the alphabetics lessons have really changed for STAR, and it's gotten much better. When you assess your students and you put them into their basic phonics group, and then you put them into an advanced alphabetics group, historically, traditionally, this is the one area that teachers feel not comfortable with. And that's understandable because as native English speakers, for most of us, or even if we're not native English speakers, we learned our language rules when we were in first grade, second grade. How in the world can we remember that far back on how we learned it? So it's really difficult for us to do phonics and advanced alphabetics, I think. What does everybody else think?
Sometimes it seems like there's a lot of front end preparation because there's so many different sounds. Like, I can't think of any examples right now, of course. So as far as planning, if you want to cover a certain ending or whatever, you have to, pre-set up the words for yourself. So the better materials we can find, the better. But yeah, to me, the setting up and the planning of it is the most time consuming part.
Yeah, finding the correct materials, just that aren't like for 6-year-olds or 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to insult our adults. Absolutely. Okay. So, what have you guys been doing in alphabetics? What did you find to teach with alphabetics? So, I need some feedback from those of you who have taught alphabetics. There were some different groups. Most of your groupings are pretty high, but you still had to cover a few of the types of instructional techniques for alphabetics. What did you guys cover?
So, like, one of the things I mean about if you're trying to teach, like the ending IAL or whatever. So, like, I had to come up with word. I mean, you can look online and find some things, but then you have to weed out. So, like, if you're teaching special, how is that different from little, the LE ending? So, to teach the IAL, like, I had to pre-plan, lists and sometimes write my own, like, things to go with it. So that's why I'm saying it seemed the most time consuming to me. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong and complicating it.
No, you're right. Eric, can you stop the screen for a little bit? I want to go into the resources tab and show them a really good book that's free. Because I'm all about free. Let me pull this up. Okay. So, can you guys see my window? Okay, it's asking me to entire screen, I guess.
And then are you sharing your screen?
I'm trying to.
It's a green.
Yeah, I hit the share screen, but it's asking me to do Chrome tab or window. Okay, I got it. Sorry. Okay, so if you go into can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. If you go into your resources tab, this one down here, sorry, hold on a second. Alphabetics. It's called decoding. Oh, making sense of decoding and spelling an adult reading course of study. It's really good. So it basically has 32 lesson plans on alphabetics.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. And it breaks it down because when you did your diagnostic assessment, there are particular patterns that you noticed. So you could ignore the patterns that you do not need to teach your students and just concentrate on the ones that they do. I've always had some students who needed the CVC vowel endings, but do you see where they give just short little lessons? And as everything else, we start with least difficult to most difficult. And you build up their words. And then on this progress check, you fill in the words. And then looky here, you can incorporate a very small fluency reading, especially for your lower level students, where they're practicing their alphabetics, decoding chunks of words, and reading at the same time. This was really, I love this book. I use it all the time. It has spelling rules. It has prefixes and suffixes. So 32 lessons would take you through the year, or depending on what you need, so that you don't have to do all that by yourself.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for highlighting that. It was there. I just didn't dig, I guess.
Well, the words are not very friendly. Making sense and
And we already know what we all think about the links thing.
Right.
oh yeah. Yeah. So exploring the resources tab is will be hopefully easier as they're getting the last 20% of their technology fixed. But yeah, that's a great resource. So Eric asked those of you who are attending KAEA. So if someone from your program, or if you come to KAEA, you will each be getting a new set of lesson plan templates that STAR sent out last year. Last year at KAEA was the first time we distributed them. And they are really, the lesson plan templates for alphabetics is really good. It gives you step 1 for phonics, step 2, step 3. It's very explicit. It has little thinking prompts for you, the teacher, so that you don't even have to think about the thinking prompts. And then it also has some digital links so that you can have them try other things. And at the end of the alphabetics part, it has huge long words so that you don't even have to, because that's the ultimate goal, right? Is for them to be able to decode those huge chunks of words. It has a list of those also. So you guys will be getting a physical copy of these lesson plan templates at KAEA. And or if you're not there, then someone from your program will bring it home to you. Okay. Any other questions on alphabetics? Okay. Eric, I think we are ready to move to our first alphabetics scenario. Okay. Yeah, Marlon. Would someone like to read that for us, please?
Marlon assessed his students in alphabetics. 4 of his students could not read all the words on the 4th grade word list he was using during the diagnostic assessment, so he assessed them on vowel and consonant sounds. Marlon found that they knew most of the consonants, but each still missed some of the blends. Results for the vowels seemed sloppy. The students got some of the words with a vowel and missed others with the same vowel. Marlon decided in order to give the students a solid base in phonics, he should start at the beginning and review each consonant and vowel sound before moving to the multi-syllabic words. He got a sequenced phonics program and began at the beginning working on the sounds and having the students read the controlled text that came with the program to be sure they could use the phonics in context. He reassessed after he taught all the consonants and vowels.
Okay, so what are the strengths of instruction that you see in this scenario?
I like how
assessed with
thorough he
students.
was.
Do what? Michelle and Jamie. Michelle, do you want to go first?
Okay, I'm sorry, Jamie. I was just saying I liked how thorough he was.
Yeah, I agree. He started with the assessment,
Yeah, starting with the assessment is vital. What else did he do about assessing?
You reassess them at the end.
Yeah, that's right. He reassessed also to monitor their progress. Okay. What do you think are some of the next slide?
Well, what can somebody help me? What is wrong with my my presentation format? I can't get slideshow to open. What am I doing wrong?
Can you X out of the sidebar
No.
if you go all the way up to the top?
No.
Oh.
I actually hit normal. I didn't mean to hit normal. Any suggestions?
I guess hit. Does anybody know how to get rid of that sidebar, you guys?
Try maybe just closing it and opening
That's
it.
what I thought. When in doubt, close it out.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay.
It's always scary.
All right, give me. I'm gonna stop sharing. Give me a second, everybody. Take a.
Is the Links website running this too?
Yeah, we're gonna blame links.
I am going to blame Links for any technical difficulty I have for the rest of my career.
Yeah, this will be one to tell your the people who follow you in your program. It's like, oh man, you guys had it so easy. You have no idea.
Back in my
Back
day.
in my day.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, so what do you think are some of the weaknesses that Marlon did? Weaknesses now.
One thing I noticed, it said that Marlon found that they knew most of the consonants, but then he decided for a base to go back and review each consonant sound. And as a student, that sounds like torture.
It's such a waste of their time, isn't it? I mean, their time is so precious. They're trying to juggle life, work, kids. It's such a waste of time to make them go through and study something that they already know. Plus, STAR is intentionally designed to always be dynamic and to constantly challenge. So you don't cover everything.
And once the students see that their time's being wasted, they're gonna shut off. Like, I'm just gonna throw it out there, doing Reading Horizons. We had an instructor who was focusing on the orthography of writing the letters. Students just checked out and wanted nothing to do with them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you have to keep them challenged and don't waste their time. You cannot do a blanket teach instruction on any of this. You have to group them so you're not wasting their time. I did want to say that looking forward to Reading Horizons, though, kind of like not making it possible that intermediate and advanced students won't have basic phonics groups. It just eliminates one instructional group in STAR if Reading Horizons can take care of the basic phonics. But
That was my thought. Yeah.
yeah, because that gets complicated with your instructional routine. But sometimes it will still happen. But hope for the best. Okay, so What do you think he could do to strengthen his alphabetics instruction?
Oh, the USB product. Yeah. It is a little loose, but we'll see.
Start teaching where they need it.
Okay.
Come on. You like to go.
Definitely start teaching only the patterns that he saw his students needed. Absolutely. What else? This one was kind of a complicated one, and I'm not sure that you saw it, but he had them practice their alphabetics only in the controlled context that they saw in the
computer. Thank you. Yeah, no problem. If you need anything else, just let us know. We will. We have not seen that. Yep. Have a good one.
Did you guys see that where he was just teaching them the controlled context? So that's not real life, right? So to give them more of a challenge, give them texts, a variety of texts, so that they can practice their alphabetics in the real world. You know, a job manual or an application for something that gives them practice in the real world would also be helpful. Not just that. Okay. Next scenario should be, I hope, Mark. No. Okay. So this is on Alice, but our handout is on Mark. So we're going, what do you want to do? Do you want to ignore the one on the screen and do the one on the handout? Or do you just want to ignore the handout and do the screen?
Anita, my handout says Alice.
So does mine on page 8.
Okay, well, mine doesn't. So we're gonna go with what you guys have, and I apologize, but I'm gonna have to get really close to this so I can read it. So can someone read that also for me, please?
I'll read it.
Okay, thank you.
Alice assessed her students in alphabetics and found 4 students need advanced alphabetics. During the assessment, the students read the beginnings of the words, but seemed to guess at the endings, so Alice decided to work on word endings. Each day, she gives a short lesson explaining a word ending. She models reading words with the ending and then has the students practice reading multisyllabic words that have that ending. These students also need to work on vocabulary, so Alice tries to include words that will be new to the students. She explains the meanings of these new words, then she has the students read orally using text around their instructional level for accuracy. If the students stumble over words, Alice stops them and helps them sound out the word, explaining or reviewing the word ending or other phonics patterns that will help the student decode the word correctly.
Okay, very good. So what do you think are some of the strengths of Alice's instruction?
I thought she used what she learned from the assessment
Okay.
to teach the students that they need to work on word endings.
Uh-huh.
She did so.
Very good. What else did she do well?
She gives a short lesson. So there's your guide or the modeling.
Yeah. And absolutely, you want to keep your alphabetics and phonics lessons pretty short. 10 to 15 minutes maximum is pretty good for alphabetics and fluency. Okay. What are some of the weaknesses in her instruction?
She is trying to do everything in one lesson, all of the areas.
That is absolutely right, Michelle. When you're teaching vocabulary, you're only teaching vocabulary. When you're teaching alphabetics, you're only teaching alphabetics. And so trying to incorporate vocabulary just muddies the waters. Yeah, that's definitely a weakness. What else?
Well, in doing so, teaching vocabulary, they're trying to do word endings on words that they don't even know. So they may not even know what the word ending is on the
That's
word.
right.
And kind of jumping to multisyllabic, I think it's more of a stepping stone than that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the lesson plans really are pretty clear on, you start with very small common words. You go from least difficult to more difficult, and then you build up with bigger chunks of words. So she kind of skipped like steps 2 and 3. She went from 1 to 4. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? How she didn't build up. You have to start with the words that they're familiar with so that they can grasp the chunk of word that you're concentrating on before you expose them to multisyllabic words. Okay. Any other weaknesses?
I mean, it starts from everything we've talked about, but then the student having to stumble over the words and then having to be stopped to sound out the words is just not conducive to learning.
Absolutely correct. Because if you do that to them, they're going to be like, okay, never going to read out loud. Yeah, that's right. Don't correct them as they're trying to stumble over the words. Let them stumble over it. And it takes practice, practice, practice. All right, very good. So how would you strengthen the instruction for this?
Start at step 1, don't skip steps 2 and 3.
Sort of gave that away already, didn't I? But yes, you do want to start with very small common words that they're familiar with and then build up and then give them opportunities to practice that for 2 or 3 days before you expose them to the long words. Okay. And if you saw in that learner's activity book that I showed you, and then being able to apply them into a small text, just that particular pattern that you're working on is also helpful. Giving them some small texts to help them practice just that one chunk that you're working on, or whatever it is, whether it's multisyllabic or compound words, whatever it is. Okay. All right. Any other suggestions on Alice's? The only question I had about Alice is that I didn't know what the 4 students were doing with the rest of the class, especially because alphabetics. What are the other students doing while she's working with the 4 students? All of you are familiar with that, classroom space. And to not make them uncomfortable, where would you put them? Or how would you do that? How would you handle it? How would you handle it, do you think? Sorry, I got to pull my chat back up. So one suggestion, just depending on your classroom space, is to have maybe another group practice their fluency where they're reading out loud, so it kind of muffles the interaction. But it just depends on your classroom space. All right. So are there any other questions about alphabetics? How many of you have students who need alphabetics?
I have a couple, Anita. I just did a couple of assessments yesterday, and it's interesting because like I had one who did who was like flying along in fluency and didn't need fluency, but like she would get to like a tier 3 type, like a almost tier 3 type word, and then like have to sit there and sound it out. So it was interesting to see like, okay, people, like I don't when people have words that aren't sight words, to see, oh, maybe they just know so many words they don't have to decode them. So that's been kind of interesting to me to see. So it's like, how do you decode things that are like at a higher level, when people are at the top of what we might think is alphabetic, they still aren't great at sounding things out. We had a student who returned to us, who had been out a while, and he came back, but we turned out based on his TABE, we were like, oh, let's do a star on him, and turned out he was kind of skimming by, like he'd been getting by in his education without actually the ability to decode stuff. He just knew a lot of words, enough to get by, but he needs some decoding ability for when he's in a situation where he doesn't know words. And it's kind of fascinating to just see. You can read so much and pretty fluently, but you still don't know how to decode. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I remember my 3 pilot diagnostic assessments. I picked this one of the students who was like the best writer in my class, always participated in conversations, and this was ESL classes or EL classes. And so I did my diagnostic assessment on her. She didn't get a single phonics pattern correct because she had just memorized so many words that she could go with the flow, but she didn't get anything right. And so it is amazing what you can learn with those assessments, and it really does help you pinpoint, do they know how to read English? So yeah, very, very, very fascinating. You just never know. That's why it's so important to do those assessments first.
That reminds me, Anita, you know how like when people are like, when they used to say about like scholars, like so-and-so has a reading knowledge of French or reading knowledge of Latin, and I'd be like, okay, so that means you can see the words and know what they are, but would you have any idea how to say them if you were a French person? That's what it kind of sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, sort of like if they've been exposed to the word or heard the word, then yeah, they can maybe repeat it, but they cannot decode chunks of words, which is the whole point of alphabetics, is to decode words that you don't know yet.
We kind of had like a fun light bulb moment in one of my advanced phonics classes. It's kind of funny. They're getting it when they're just like telling you all these words that like don't follow the rules of like phonics, and like, those that just don't follow the rules of how the sound should be. Like generally, like those boys would just make all these lists of like, well, this word doesn't follow that rule, and this word and this word. So I don't know. I just thought it was funny how they're just like telling me all these words that don't follow the rules. I'm like, yeah, okay, you guys get it.
Oh, that's great. That's what you call an active learner. That's great. Yeah. And then, you know, that's always wonderful to give them those few alphabetics lessons. It's like, yeah, we just did long vowel CVC, but guess what? There are so many words that don't follow that. Sorry. Sorry. It's English. So many words don't follow that. But that's great that they engaged with you like that. Okay, so I think we are good for our break.
I was just gonna
Is
suggest that. Yep.
Okay.
How long are we taking a break for? I don't have the agenda in front of me. I don't have it brought up.
For 15 minutes. I just don't know on the time. How are we doing on time? I think we're okay.
It's 9:55.
So does everyone want to be back at 10:10?
Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing. All right, we'll have everybody come back at 10:10. Quick restroom break, get some water. We'll get back into more slides. We're doing great. Love the interaction.
Yeah, that's always the best when you hear from everybody. That's strange that my handout is not the same as this one.
Okay, I'm gonna get to different slides, Nita. I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Alrighty. So there are lots of really good echo reading and repeated reading free resources on your in your resources tab. Now, I know for a fact that all of your programs have some wonderful commercial products. Every single one of your programs, because I always watched with envy with the stuff that your programs had. So you be sure and talk to your program directors about all of the good works that they have from Jamestown. The six word way paragraphs. All of you guys have that. So you're just going to have to ask your directors about the commercial products that you had to pay for, because you all have them. Have you any of you been exposed? Dan, I don't know about your program, but all the other programs, and I bet you guys do too, don't you, Dan? Like the commercial sources.
Of reading texts.
Yeah, like Jamestown does a lot of publishing on texts. The six way words. What is that called? Does anyone have that? I know.
I have it. I think it's called Paragraph 6 Ways. And I love it because, I mean, love is a strong word, but it it's like they try to do a high interest reading, and then later, like if you want the students to take it beyond, there's main idea, there's a supporting detail, there's a what does this word mean in this paragraph thing. So yeah, I would say that's worth something it's worth checking into.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. I knew it was something. So anyway, and then most of you guys have subscriptions to like Newsela, or is that how you say it? I always called it Newsela, but someone that said it was News ELA, and I was like, oh.
We
so
have
whatever.
the free version of News ELA or Newsela.
Okay, yeah, I know. Yeah, those are all good. Those are all good for texts. I was going to share one more time. I was just going to show you something that I would do for some of my lower students. What is that going to be? Chrome tab again? I don't know. Yeah. So at the end of my vocabulary, yeah, so this is the very end of my vocabulary, the read and respond. And then I just have a 1-page little fluency text. And honestly, for your lower grade levels, this is perfect. It's just 1 page of text. And it's like on real world situations too. And so those texts come at the end of your vocab units too. Okay. Let me check the chat. Oh yeah, that's right, Jamie. Kansas State Library. Everybody can have free ebooks now. That's right. Have you guys had your students sign up for the Kansas Library card? Yeah, lots of good ebooks that you can get on that.
Oh,
all right, very
good. Not K-State, the university. It's the state of Kansas.
Yeah, the state of Kansas.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, they have a free library card. So if you go to your college library or to your town library and ask for the application for the state of Kansas library card. And having said that, the last thing is that in the resources tab in your fluency, there is a PDF where you can grade any text that you copy to see what level it is. You guys know how you do that, where you type in the text and it will tell you what grade level it is? You guys have that in your free resources tab too. That PDF to convert to grade level. Okay, I think Eric,
Grade level or, sorry, I need a grade level or NRS level?
I think grade level. Or either one would be applicable. You just have to switch it. I'm pretty sure it's grade, yeah, it's grade level. Okay, we are ready for the first fluency scenario, and I'm checking, hoping it's the same as I have. Yes, it is.
Linda?
Who would like to read that?
Somebody who hasn't read already.
Okay.
I guess that's me. I haven't read.
Go for it.
Okay, fluency scenario 1. Linda assessed her students in fluency and found all 14 of the students in her class made fluency instruction using text at about the same level. So she chose a novel around that level and does collaborative oral reading with the group. Linda introduces the day's reading by reviewing with the students what was read the day before and previewing some difficult words. Then they take turns reading a few lines and passing randomly to other students, with Linda taking turns as well. Linda stops once in a while to discuss what is happening in the story. Students are encouraged to take their books home to review what was read, but are asked not to read ahead.
Okay, so on the next page, what are the strengths that you think that Linda did in her fluency instruction? What are some of her strengths?
We assessed everybody, so that's good.
Yeah.
I think previewing some of the difficult words beforehand is a good idea.
Okay. Very good.
She chose a
else?
text that was at about the student's level.
Yes, very good. What else?
Stopping once in a while to discuss what's happening in the story.
Yeah. Yeah. You as a teacher know that sometimes you just really need to stop and reflect on maybe an Americanism or something that they don't understand, or a concept that may be difficult. So just stopping every once in a while to explain it is good.
We
Okay.
had one where it was our this setting is in 1961, and these kids, one kid referred to another kid as a square, and I was like, I bet they don't know what that is.
Yeah, excellent example. You're right. Okay, so what do you think are some of the weaknesses that she did in this instruction? How many students does she have?
She has 14, and I'm wondering if they were all at the same level.
Even if they were at the same level, that's way too big for a collaborative oral reading group. You want to keep your echo reading and repeating reading are very small, like 1 to 3 students. But even for your collaborative oral reading, you really don't want more than 4 or 5. The purpose of collaborative oral reading is to give lots and lots and lots of practice. So if you have 14 people in your group, you're not going to get to practice very much. So you need to separate those groups down so that everybody can read at least 3 times. That's my own personal magic number. I want to make sure that everyone can read at least 3 times during a fluency reading, which is only 15 minutes. So
So if you break the group into, let's say, two, what would the other group be doing? Working on?
For me personally, everybody reads at the same time. You could have them do something different. You could have one group working on vocabulary, but sometimes it's kind of hard to concentrate on vocabulary if fluency is going. So what I do is I rotate from group to group to group, and they know that that they have to read, and I have to get through all the groups for me to listen. One thing that I just wish that I have never been able to accomplish is volunteers, is to get volunteers to come in there and help conduct fluency groups so that you can have a good model for each group. It would just so much help it. But the practical necessities of my setting was that I rotated from group to group to group, which is again really why you want small groups, so you can be sure to listen to everyone. And so yeah, you just have to figure out your instructional routine. But
Just the logistics of trying to go from one group to another and know what's going on when you get to the group, to ask them what's happening in the story when you might not even know yourself because you just got to the group because you were dealing with another group.
No, I just lean over and look at their page number.
Yeah, and as you're more familiar with the material.
Yeah. So, and remember that when you are in collaborative oral reading groups, you, the teacher, take a turn. It's really important for them to hear good, precise, accurate reading with good rate and prosody. So whenever I'm at a table, I can't leave until I also have not only heard everyone, but that they have heard me at least once. That's really important. Some of my rules for collaborative oral reading is that we do not correct each other. If someone makes a mistake, don't jump in and say, "Oh no, you say it this way." First of all, your students might not be saying it correctly either. But more importantly, because this is such a critical moment in their reading stage, if people start correcting them, they're going to get gun shy and they're going to like, I don't want to read. Everybody's just going to keep on correcting me. So don't correct each other. Just let them work it out. It may take them a few times to struggle over the words, and they're not going to say it correctly. But guess what? That word is going to come up with someone else, either you or someone else in the group, and they'll say, "Oh, that's how you say that word." So don't make them gun shy. My rule is that if they themselves don't know how to say it, they can stop and ask, "How do you say this word?" And that's the only way that I don't let other students correct other students, because it makes them nervous and gun shy, and we don't want them to be embarrassed. We want them to really get into the process. Okay, I went off on a tangent, but I forgot to say that earlier, and I wanted to make sure I said that. One other tangent before I go on is that they are so frustrated when they say, "Oh, I don't understand half these words." And that is when you say, "This is not a vocabulary lesson right now. This is a fluency lesson. We are working on pretty English. We are working on smooth reading. How do the words sound coming out of your mouth? It's okay if you don't understand the vocabulary words. This is not a vocabulary lesson now. We work on fluency so that you can get comfortable, so that your brain can get focused and comfortable on pausing at commas and periods and asking questions, so that you can see the words and you get so much practice in it that your brain cells free up and you therefore have more time to focus on comprehension." So it's like a broken record. You honestly have to say that every day. It's like, this is not a vocabulary lesson. This is fluency. We're working on pretty English. How does it sound coming out of your mouth? Okay, those were my tangents. Sorry.
I had a quick success story I wanted to share, Anita, is like
Excellent.
what we had when I have a group of 3 that I was doing this with, and it when they that with this, I would have them call, pick who was next, and they really seemed to get a kick out of having the power to call on me, especially like when you have like teenagers who are, transitioning out of a public school world where they're, you're doing what you're told all the time, for them to be able to say, oh, I can call on the teacher and something I do make the teacher do something. They seem to get a kick out of that.
That's great. You're right. That is absolutely great. Yeah. It's like, oh, hey, I've got some control over this. Another thing is that sometimes they call on the teacher when they're not quite sure those words that are coming up. And so they stop right there and pass it on. Now, the reason we do random assignments in collaborative oral reading is that it forces them to focus and stay engaged, which is good practice for the brain muscle, right? It's like, oh, well, if she's reading a whole paragraph, I'm totally ignoring her and I'm going to go down and read my paragraph and practice really hard. So if you do the random collaborative oral reading, they never know when the other person is going to stop, and it forces them to stay focused and engaged, which enhances their brain muscle, which ultimately frees it up for comprehension. It's a wonderful process. Okay, so I really got off on a tangent there, but before we go to that one, how would you strengthen Linda's instruction?
Smaller, multiple groups.
Very well. Anything else you would do? One other thing I would suggest to do is, as a teacher, because STAR is so dynamic and you want to make sure you are constantly challenging them and moving them on, is to take notes of what you hear. So like Hannah, when you did the hatchet and it was, paper, you can write down on the side if you hear particular patterns that they're missing, or if they're rushing through something, you just write that down and say, okay, I know that, my next alphabetics lesson, I need to focus on this pattern because I keep on hearing it. So you, the teacher, can jot down notes so that it is a constant monitoring of their progress, so that you're constantly challenging them. Okay, scenario 2.
I had one more question. What about letting them read ahead? Is that a good thing or not a good thing?
Yeah, it's fine. They can read ahead as much as they want. I mean, the more reading, the better. And so when they get back to class or when they're reading, it is a review, and maybe it makes them even more comfortable. So yeah, let them own the process of reading. Let them read ahead. It's fine. Good question. Okay, who would like to read this one who has not read yet? Okay, I'm going to start pointing fingers.
All right, I haven't read yet, so I guess I'll go. Karen assessed her students in fluency and found only 2 students need instruction in fluency. Their reading is slow and choppy, and they do not pause at the correct places. Karen set up tape players in 2 attached rooms and showed the 2 students how to do repeated reading using a tape as the model. She bought tape recordings at the students' instructional levels each day while the rest of the class works on comprehension for half an hour. The 2 students work on fluency. First, they time themselves reading the day's passage. Then they listen to the taped reading of the passage. Next, they read along with the tape and then read the passage orally several times without the tape. Finally, they time themselves reading the passage and mark the time of the reading and their initial and final times on their fluency chart. Karen checks the charts after class and praises the students for their progress.
All right, very good. So what do you think are the strengths of the instruction in this one?
That she had taped readings at the students' levels.
Yeah, very good. Which also means she assessed them, right? Because she knew what their levels were. So it's definitely always a strength to assess them. Okay. Anything else that's a strength?
Props to her for trying to have a multitasking plan. I don't think it was so great to have them off by themselves where she wasn't even evaluating their progress. Like she wasn't hearing it live, like you said, dynamically, but she was trying to accomplish a event thing smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, especially if she's using repeated reading for the whole class to listen to 30 minutes of that, which is pretty long, would be
That would be
really,
a really long thing.
yeah, yeah, right. Okay. So segueing into the weaknesses, the weaknesses is, of course, she's not with them, right?
She
Yeah,
only
they could be
assesses
sitting
what
on
they
their phone.
write in the chart
Yeah,
instead
what
of
they,
actually
yeah,
what they do.
yeah. Okay. Um, the the problem with the choppy reading is that what is she checking for? She's only checking for their timing, right? That doesn't necessarily, the timing of how fast they read doesn't really help rate and prosody, does it? I mean, you
Not
can
by
read
itself,
really fast.
no.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. I was going to give an example, but go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say not by itself, no.
No.
And she's not even there to see if they're actually doing anything. They
Yeah.
could just be writing down a time, and then she's like, great job, guys.
Yeah. And if they're like the 16, 17-year-olds, you know they're on their cell phones. So yeah, yeah. And yeah, we do appreciate the idea of trying to separate them so they're not embarrassed. And then the other thing is, gosh, the length of time. Did it say how long it was? Why did I think it said 30 minutes?
Yeah, it says half an hour.
Oh, man, that's a long time for repeated reading. Okay, so how do you think we should strengthen her instruction?
Lower the time and then make sure she's there with them for at least some of the time that they're working on their fluency to be able to give actual feedback and help.
Yeah, how much time do you think you would lower it to?
Probably 15 minutes.
Yeah, ultimate tops. I mean, have you ever had to listen to someone who's doing repeated reading for 10 minutes? I mean,
Especially if it's just one person, that's a lot of reading and that amount of time.
yeah, it really is. For one person for 10 minutes, it is a lot of time. So definitely decrease the time to 10 to 15 minutes. What else could she do? Uh, so definitely what Dan was already saying is that you have to be in there and listen to them sometimes. You need to be able to monitor their progress because STAR is continually challenging and keeping them on a dynamic track. We don't want to waste their time. So you need to go in there and monitor their progress and then sit down and talk with them. What do you think you did well? What are you hearing that you need to work on? Let them set some goals, some short-term goals, very short near-term goals on what they can do to improve their reading. Yeah. Okay, any other suggestions?
It looks like when she's checking the charts, what she's praising them for is how fast they're reading. And so I think maybe their whole goal isn't really defined.
Yeah, absolutely, Alicia. Yeah, I can read really, 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 really fast too, but that doesn't make it any good at all. You want it to be like a lazy river, nice and smooth. Very good. Excellent suggestions. Okay. So is there another scenario?
So give me a second here. My slides are not in the right spot. I've got comprehension. Are we ready to move on to comprehension? I'm sorry, there is no other scenario under fluency. That was it.
Okay, I was just checking because I didn't have one either, but sometimes my notes don't coalesce with what everyone else has. So we only had one fluency instruction. Does anyone have any comments or questions that they had in their notes before we move on to comprehension?
We never really mentioned how long we spend on alphabetics.
Same thing. I would keep them from 15 to 20 minutes long when you're doing alphabetics instruction. Yeah, 15 to 20 minutes is long because you want to stay focused on a particular pattern or chunk of word that you're focusing on. Okay, I'm going to check and see. There were a couple of comments that I wanted. Okay, should we have all students use all 4 fluency strategies? No, it's not necessary for students to use all 4 of them. So again, like I said, keep the echo reading and the repeated reading for the lower levels, and then collaborative oral reading for your more confident intermediate, higher intermediate. We didn't talk about marked phrase boundaries. Have you ever noticed? I'm sure you all have, where students, just speed through that sentence. I mean, the period. They get to the end of it and they just move on because they're so nervous. So this might be a comfort thing for all your students, not just for the lower level, is to also work on marked phrases where you have them sit down and mark those periods, commas, and questions, and teach them how to take a breath and to pause, because that also helps with comprehension. So that's the one thing we didn't cover. Has anyone used marked phrase boundaries? Okay. Anyway, I always start off with marked phrase boundaries, and I'm like a broken record. Every day I tell them, this is not a vocabulary lesson, it's fluency. We're working on a pretty English, and I give them examples of what rate and prosody is. Literally, I say, you do not want to talk like the tape and then read the past. I give them examples. And you also don't want to say orally several times with that tape, didn't they times, and instead of reading the passage, give them real life modeling on how to do it. Okay. Any other questions on fluency?
I kind of had one when we're in one of the passages when I was doing an assessment yesterday. I had a pretty high level reader, and it seemed there's on one of the passages, like there's a couple spots where there ought to be a comma, but there isn't. I don't remember off the top of my head what it is, but like it's interesting to see somebody who's higher level who will like let's say the sentence starts with then, and then they'll say then, and then there's that brief little pause where there ought to be a pause, and then they go into the sentence, and so like I'm sitting there going, oh, this person has comma sense. They understand where there's supposed to be a comma. It kind of fascinates me to see people do that because I'm listening for rate and prosody, but if they're pausing where there should be a written comma and there isn't, it's pretty interesting to see that kind of that indicates to me a really high level of understanding of reading the language.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And listen to them have conversations, and you can point out to them, it's like, you know, you do really well on that. You read like you talk. And when we talk, we do talk that way. Then, you know, I went to Walmart. So yeah, perfectly a good example to point out, this is what you're doing well. You know, tell them you're doing that really well. Sorry, I got to shut my door again. Sorry. Okay, we're ready for comprehension though, Eric.
Maybe the mailman's there.
Okay.
So can you see my comprehension slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so as you recall, we don't really work on comprehension until they have tested out, graded out of some of the other three. One of the other three. So comprehension is the last one because, as we know, lack of vocabulary can impact comprehension. Choppy reading, fluency can impact comprehension, alphabetics. So once they've freed up one of those first three, then you can move on to comprehension instruction. So I love this one also. I just wish there was more time always to spend on comprehension, but it takes a while to get them pulled up to this level. Is you're giving them skills that they will use forever for the rest of their life. The skills that they learn in comprehension on how to set up text structures will last them forever, whether they're reading something on the job or whether they're going to college or vocational school. The reading skills that you're teaching them in comprehension will last forever. It's a life skill. So it's just a radical move away from you're teaching them a particular curriculum. Comprehension is all about the skill. And in comprehension, you should apply these skills multiple different ways. Okay, so I brought some materials, and I think that I did see quite a few comments on people really liking the examples in the module, in the comprehension module, on how to build up comprehension, like starting with just a simple flyer and working on that and building the way up. I do that also. These are just some examples, but I always start off with getting the gist. The skill of identifying the main idea and the key details, which absolutely coalesces with CCRS standards, right? Identifying the main idea and key details. So we do, this takes a lot of modeling. I mean, honestly, it definitely takes 2 to 3 weeks of just getting the gist for me. And we practice just the process again and again and again. Who or what is this mostly about? Just a flyer or a poster. Who or what is this mostly about? What are some of the repeated words? Number 2, what is the most important point the author makes about this topic? And then after we write that down, we have to narrow that down to 10 words. So we have to practice, and it helps them learn to summarize, but it's really good practice. And so I use this again and again and again, just these 2 questions, and then limiting down to 10 words or less. We do it on the board, and then we do it on the board several times every day. And then I just pass out magazine ads. And then they have to say who or what is this mostly about? What are some of the repeated words? And what is the most important point the author makes about this? And then writing down the gist in 10 words or less. So this is really good practice. You just have to always tell them, yes, of course they're trying to sell a product. It's a magazine ad. But what are they saying about the product? So this is a really good one to start with. And, just ask your local library for stacks of old magazines and tear them out and use them in your classes. Another thing that I use are commercials. So if you happen to have been lucky enough to have been doing comprehension during the Super Bowl ads are really good for getting the gist. You can really have some good commercials on Super Bowl ads. And then you move on to small texts. And you can physically do that same thing of getting the gist for one paragraph, then the next paragraph, then the next paragraph, then the next paragraph. And then you can do it for the whole article. So comprehension has wonderful materials that you can use to help build that up and help them teach the skill of getting the gist. I personally always start with getting the gist. And personally, I wish I had that skill when I went to college. It would have been really nice to have been taught that skill on how to do that. And once you get past getting the gist, you move on to the other skills of, the 5 W's and H, like a good reporter, cause and effect, problem solution, reflect and sequence, and reflect and evaluate. If you can stop sharing no, never mind. Sorry, I X'd out of my resources. No, maybe not. Maybe it's still there. Okay, sorry. I'll have to wait a little bit when someone else is talking, but I'll pull up some of the resources that are in the back of the comprehension. Okay, what have other people learned or found out about when they were doing comprehension?
I had watched this video before I was planning my January, February class session, and kind of towards the end of my November, December class session. So I decided I was going to heavily focus on getting the gist and then work in text structures. And I'm happy with how it went. It was a really good video to watch, I thought. And if I'm not mistaken, isn't that gal from Kansas City, like KCC? Okay, she was my star trainer back in like 2013 or whatever, or 14 or 15. Okay, I thought that was her. That's so cool.
Yeah, she was. That's right. Yeah, I really miss not having Shelly here from Kansas City because, yeah, she would always talk about that. But, yeah, was her name Beecham? Yeah, she was from Kansas City, Kansas Community College. Yeah, she does a really good job about explaining how to do comprehension. Just really great instructions for a teacher.
I've, for me, Anita, I've been getting to teach this. I'm lucky enough where I've gotten to we've had a whole at my center like a whole curriculum of doing all those different strategies and stuff. And like I'm very lucky in my situation, and so I have found that like the biggest thing for like it's almost a hurdle with a lot of like native speaker students who, when it comes to getting the gist, sorry, that's what I'm trying to say. When it comes to getting the gist, it's a really big hurdle for them because it's just my opinion that like especially if they're under the age of like 23, all they've ever known is somebody wanting them to give their reaction to everything. And so when they're reading this text and you ask them what the main idea is, if you don't make sure they know that main idea is a technical term for the writer's main points, they just hear main idea and think, oh, well, what's my takeaway? What's your reaction to this? And that's where I think they're making so many reading comprehension errors because they're thinking, oh, this is how I feel about it, so that must be the writer's main point. If I read a paragraph about uniforms and I hate uniforms, well, the writer's point is uniforms are bad, or the writer's point is they're talking about uniforms. And you ask what's the main idea, and they might say, oh, well, uniform, so this one person said uniforms are good, or this one person said uniforms are bad, but the writer's point was that uniforms are good, but they're focusing on that detail because they're just trying to react to it. And I feel like I'm just basically coaching them to take an objective view and a listening view as opposed to this world of social media where we're just supposed to react to stuff all the time so they can get our data. I feel like that's one of my biggest challenges with a lot of the native speaker students that I have.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
a really good point. And I think it's very astute for that.
And even some of the older ones, it's a thing. Like I had a student that he passed all the GED tests except for language arts. And I'm like, I need to watch what you're doing. And I finally figured out that he was reading it. And like you said, Michael, putting his opinion, like he would read a article about twins and then he would think of twins from his own family. Well, they don't do that. He would start arguing with the text. So I had to very much talk about what text dependent is. Like we are currently not putting our opinion on this. We are literally directing back always to the text. What are they saying? Not what do I know about it, but what is their point about it? So yeah, that's definitely a thing. Good observation. All ages, I think, tend to their opinion rather than what's actually reading.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Michelle, isn't it like ultimately we want to get, we're all stubborn. We're going to get them through the GED as long as they keep showing up, but like, isn't that such an important communication skill to like listen to what people are trying to tell us and not just how we feel about it. And so like, for me, that's like the exciting part is to be like, oh, I'm going to help this person be way more successful. Maybe if they have this mindset that they're going to listen to what somebody's trying to tell them, and maybe they'll improve their overall communication skill. Maybe, I mean, that's the ego of a teacher, I guess. But it gives me a reason to get up out of bed in the morning.
Well, absolutely, Michael. And you kind of want them to be able to identify main idea and key details on a job. I don't know what the manual was for the door for that Alaskan Airlines thing, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, you want them to be able to get rid of extraneous information and be able to identify to get the main idea and the key details for all of us, whether they're a nurse or a welder or putting those doors on. You just want to make sure that they can get the key details. I just think that we really do a disservice to students if we don't teach them the skills, not a curriculum, but that skill, so that when they go to college, you know, like I had one student who, just like Michelle, just kept on flunking her GED because she didn't have the skill of compare and contrast, which she was using for the sciences one. So absolutely, you just have to teach them that skill. It's such a disservice to them if we don't do it. Okay, so let's move on to the first scenario. Just always checking to see if it's the same. Yeah, I've got the same. Okay, who has not read?
I have not.
Okay.
All 12 of the students in Ed's class have a CASAS reading score at an intermediate level. He knows that they need work on comprehension. Ed also wants to prepare the students for the social studies portion of the GED test, which he knows involves being able to read and comprehend. Ed decides to begin with American history and the 5 W's and H strategy. First, he explains the strategy and models it for the students using a section from the pre-GED Social Studies workbook on Columbus and the discovery of America. Then he guides the students in using the strategy with him using a passage on the 13 colonies. Finally, the students use the strategy on their own with a passage about the westward expansion. After each lesson, Ed reviews what they have learned about American history to be sure the students comprehend what they have read. Ed then tests the students to see what they understand and remember about this period in American history.
Very good. Thank you, Faith. Okay, so what do you think are some of the strengths of his instruction?
The teacher explaining to the students the strategy, modeling it.
Yep. Like a broken record. This is what we're doing. Very good. Okay. Did he give them guided practice and application?
Yes.
Mhm.
He guided the students and then had them do the strategy on their own.
Okay, very good. So it is a strength of he did do the 4 steps of evidence-based reading instruction, the explicit instruction. Okay, so what's your overall impression on weaknesses? What is he teaching?
Content.
It's like, is that history or or reading? I'm not sure.
Yeah. He's focusing on the content, but they need the skill. So starting smaller would be a better. I like your showing us the advertisements and stuff. That was a good. That's good.
Yeah, they're pretty fun. So right, absolutely. The skill comes first before the content. We don't teach the curriculum, we teach a skill. Okay, what else did he not do well?
Not a lot of practice before they jump into a further level or a little bit, more extensive reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I guess maybe they, you really have to spend some time with each one of those skills before you move on to something else. But did he
There's no
assess?
sort of,
Oh,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
There's
Go ahead.
no real assessment of their reading, like a post test. He tested for content, but not reading.
Absolutely. He tested for his social studies, which, they need for their GED. But as far as what do we know about their comprehension skills? He didn't do a diagnostic assessment. We don't know where they started. And he didn't assess their reading skills at the end, just on the content area. Okay, so how would you improve his instruction?
If he wanted to kind of be related to the content, he could start with very basic, well, with using the idea of advertising, but maybe with very simple political cartoons.
Mm-hmm. Or, like, westward expansion, go west, young man. The flyer of the Go West.
Yes. Yeah, excellent.
Okay, what else should he do?
Maybe try to work with smaller groups because he has all 12 students.
Yeah, because he needs to be able to monitor their progress, right? Yeah. You have to have the whole I do, we do, you do. It's got to be broken down into smaller bits. What else does he need to do?
Focus on the skills, main idea, finding, is it, what kind of passage is it? Is it compare contrast? Is it, the other ones?
Yeah. Problem solution. Yeah. Sequence would be really good in history, wouldn't it? I bet you could find a lot of sequential texts in history. Absolutely. And then he also has to tell them. It's like, we are working on the skill. You have to be a broken record for all this stuff. You have to keep on telling them what is the purpose. And you have to tell them we're teaching you the skill of identifying key details or comparing and contrast. You need to tell them so that they understand it and can feel empowered once they do get it.
And for the social studies test, they shouldn't have to be, memorizing things about American history and feeling like that's something that they need to be doing. They need to be explicitly told not to.
Right. Because it might not be on that test at all. It might be something totally different. You're right. Okay.
Yeah, the reading skill is the key for passing the social studies, not memorizing some historical information.
Yeah. Yeah. We absolutely. You just don't want your students to be disappointed. It's like, I did all this for my GED and it didn't help. It's like, you really want to make sure that they get the skill. All righty. Any other suggestions? Okay, shall we move on to the second scenario? Oh, it's already there. Thanks, Eric. Would someone mind reading? I'm just on a Chromebook, and so it's really, really small.
Is everybody going?
Well, no, they're out there.
No, I meant, is everybody read?
I don't think so.
I
Who has
haven't
not-
read yet, but I feel like I talk a lot. So that's why I haven't volunteered. Trying to be quiet, believe it or not.
Well, I just can't. Honestly, my Chromebook is so little. If I would appreciate it.
I can read it. Volusia can read it.
Thank you.
Sandra assessed her students and found that they needed instruction in comprehension and that their instructional levels in comprehension ranged from GLE 4 through 8. She decided to teach them to use text structures to organize information. First, she explained 2 reasons why authors write: to explain a sequence of events and to recount order of events, chronology, and connected these reasons to text structures. She showed the students graphic representations of these structures and modeled how to fill them in using text at grade 7. The next day, Sandra reviewed the 2 text structures she had introduced. Excuse me, goodness sakes. Okay, excuse me. Now I lost my spot.
That she had introduced.
Okay, she had introduced and gave the students some text at GLE 7 that fit these patterns. She worked with them to identify the text structures for each text and to complete the graphic organizer for each text. The next day, Sandra had the students do the same thing with new texts at GLE 7, working in pairs as she circulated around the room assisting to be sure the students were on track. The next day, the students worked independently on a similar assignment with new texts at GLE 7. Next week, Sandra plans to introduce 2 additional text structures: cause and effect, and compare and contrast.
Very good, thank you. So what are the strengths of this one? It's got some pretty good solid strengths in this one.
She did the assessments and she's focusing on comprehension, on reading skills, which is good. And she's working directly with them. And the graphic organizer is a great way to help to show comprehension.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is this the first one that we've actually gotten where the teacher is going from group to group and helping with the guided practice? I think this is the only one that's had guided practice so far, isn't it? I can't remember, but it seems like it. But yeah, definitely good guided practice.
There's a little in the last one, but not much. Not like this.
Not as great as this one. And then the whole steps of she moves from the I do, we do to the you do. You know, it's really, that's good too. Okay. What do you think are some of the weaknesses of the structure? Instruction, not structure. What are her students' levels?
Yeah, it says 4 to 8, and then she's using level 7 as the instruction, which would be appropriate for some of them, but not all of them.
Right. Right. And as far as comprehension levels go, remember we try to keep them grouped in 3s, you know, so 4, 5, and 6 could work together, or 6, 7, and 8, whatever. But we try to keep them in groups of 3 in 3 levels, no more than that. So someone at a grade level 4 would feel overwhelmed by a grade level 7 text for sure.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit, Anita, of like when we're doing our diagnostic assessment, and you're like doing vocabulary and you're going right along, and they seem to know everything, and then they run into a patch of mud so quickly, and I feel like, you know, for somebody that's like a 4 with an 8, like they would run into that patch of mud, and the 4 would be so stuck in the mud below an 8, like it just wouldn't work at all.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. You can see it on their face even, can't you? It's like, okay.
It kind of sounds like she's going really quick too. Like she has 2 different text structures, and then the next week another 2 more text structures.
I agree, Alicia. I wouldn't go that fast with the graphic organizers or the text structure. It, to make sure that they really understand it, because again, a life skill. So we can spend more than 2 weeks on this life skill that they'll take with them. So what would you do differently? How would you improve her instruction?
Divide them up into maybe levels 4, 5, and 6, and then 7 and 8 as a different group.
Mm-hmm. And then, so we do have them divided. What text level would you do for your 4, 5, 6?
5.
Yeah, 5 or 4 even, when you're doing the whole group discussion that we do, keep it at the lower level. And then when you get into the guided practice and definitely the application, make sure it's at their level. But yeah, you don't want to chunk them up there with the 6 already, for sure. Okay, very good. Okay. What about what else would you do with this class? I mean, she's almost there. I like this one the best. But what thing would you do differently with this?
I think I would only do one text structure at a time, not 2 at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Okay. Do they all have to have the same text? No. No. Yeah, give them numerous texts, same level, just different text to apply it. Numerous opportunities. Okay. So I was going to look at some comments on the comprehension. Okay. This person, they taught the getting the gist and the 5 W's and H. They taught the text structures in social studies and science classes, but they felt that using the different text structures went really well, but the evaluating text has been more difficult. So they felt that more guided practice was needed with this strategy. Have you guys looked at the graphic? I forgot. Eric, can you stop sharing for a second so I can share the resources for comprehension? Thank you. Chrome tab, which is weird. Okay, so you guys can find these anywhere, but I do like the graphic organizers that they helped set up. And Michelle, was it you? This whole step-by-step guide on getting the gist. Who was that really noticed this? Michelle, Stacy, Jamie? Didn't one of you guys like the script?
I didn't use it, but I like the idea.
I use the ones for compare and contrast.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it nice when it really just help you from step to step to step on how to first introduce getting the gist? Yeah, this is a nice little script. I mean, it gives you the words that you can use for it. So that's really nice for getting the gist, you guys. And then compare and contrast script. And then all of the different graphic organizers. And I'm sure that you all have graphic organizers, but the first time that I taught, I didn't have any of this stuff. I had a curriculum, but I didn't have all of these graphic organizers. And I just remember I wanted to use all of them at once. And I was told, it's like, okay, slow down, just do one at a time, make sure they understand it, and then move on. But it really does get a little bit more complicated, doesn't it? So have you guys used these kind of graphic organizers before? Yeah. How about a vote? Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs down, no. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure most of you have, but especially for your visual learners, it's a real godsend to have that kind of way to separate it in their head. Okay, any more questions about comprehension?
I wasn't quite sure from the way that it read about Sandra whether when she said she was going to do, didn't she say she was going to do 2 in a week? Like, is it, did I just miss how many?
Yeah, no. Like 2 different text structures, like she might have moved on to, what was the one she was doing? Was it the 5 W's and H?
No, it says, last sentence says next week she plans to introduce 2 additional text structures. I guess my question is, unless I missed it, what's unclear is if she has 4 days of class, she might be able to do cause and effect Monday and Tuesday and comparing and contrast Wednesday and Thursday, maybe. But I mean, I don't know.
Except for we want to give them numerous opportunities to practice. You know, like the important thing with this is to cross different types of texts to give them numerous opportunities to practice. So just 2 days to first know it and then learn it and practice it and apply it and then move on to the next one. It might not be a pretty solid understanding yet. I mean, you do always have time constraints. And honestly, Michaels, I can't recall ever being able to get to reflect and evaluate. So thumbs up for those to you who are able to get to it. But honestly, I find it usually difficult with English language learners to get beyond getting the gist and the 5 W's and H. That's just, sometimes I can do sequence, but it's pretty difficult to get through all of those in an 8-week session for sure. I think. What do you guys think?
I feel like something that's happened to me is I'll feel like I've gone through getting the gist and stuff for a week or 2, and then I literally had one student who I know she'd had that course, and then it was like the next session we were working on social studies stuff of all things, and she was just like, "Oh, so when you say main idea, you're just talking about the general point." It's like, cool, it clicked finally. That's good, because you can feel like you're having them say out loud and practice, and they're saying the general point, but maybe it didn't completely sink in, and there could be a delay there. So as long as they get it, I don't care. But yeah, because it's like, yeah, I feel like, I guess my point is, I feel like I'm teaching them that, and maybe I feel like they're getting it from the things they're telling me and from what I'm seeing them write down, and then I move on to sequence or cause and effect, and I come back, and then, but they're still making errors in finding the main idea. So
No, you're right. Yeah, it's just like, like the analogy of, we don't teach first graders. It's like they want to go and get a driver's license and boom, they have it. You know, it's a building process and it takes a while, but you got to be really rigorous. And so, you know, you have to work on the skills instead of the curriculum, to be very rigorous to make sure that you're teaching something that they'll eventually pick up, like you said.
So Anita, we're at a point now where we can go to lunch early. And
Woohoo! Look at us.
and instead of doing 30 minutes, which was kind of a slam to, when we first did the agenda, gosh, back in August, we were like, oh man, we're gonna be really tight as far as schedule, but we can expand it a little bit and give ourselves a little bit extra time and still come back at 12:30. Not feel rushed would be my recommendation. I defer. Anybody else? Up. Okay. See a lot of thumbs up. Let's go ahead and take our lunch break, and we'll come back at 12:30.
Okay, sounds
I'm gonna
good.
remember to hit pause on the recording. First off, resume recording. So we are back after lunch. Show 12:35, and Anita, I'm going to turn it over to you. According to our agenda, we're going to talk about reviewing evidence-based reading.
Yes. So this is basically just a summation of why do STAR? What is the difference from STAR than from the other curriculum handing out there? So first of all, it is based on evidence-based scientific results. These results come from data, research, just like we have seen this trend of the brain science. STAR has been doing brain science for a decade now. It also comes from consensus from experts in the field. So it is, quite frankly, if you look at the back of who started CCRS, a lot of those people started STAR. So it's well-founded scientifically and professionally. The difference with STAR is that it also takes into consideration two very important components, the students. So it will take students' self-assessments and students monitoring just as much as the other ones, because they must be invested in the process of reading. Finally, it takes the teacher practitioner into consideration, and you are the expert in your classroom, and you are the one who will be doing the decisions on moving students up. And finally, I think the major difference between STAR and other curriculum is that it is constant monitoring and observations. We didn't cover a few of the assessment components, assessment tools in the components. But for example, when you do fluency, there is a student's self-assessment. You have them assess how they think they're doing, and then you sit down with them and you assess how they're doing, and then you compare the two. Typically, the students are much harder on themselves than the actual teacher is. But, and like we talked about in vocabulary, you have that knowledge rating skill. In comprehension, when you watch the module, the lady from Kansas City talks about how, she observes them. And if they're getting the major parts of that particular text at that level, she moves them up. Alphabetics, you observe and monitor through their fluency readings. Whatever you're practicing, when it's time for the fluency reading, you listen to that particular alphabetics chunk and see how they did with that. So it's a constant monitoring, and these students do not stay static. And it's just like we all wish and hope for in a classroom. When I first started, it just really felt uncomfortable seeing some students struggle and some students be done. This takes that away. Everyone is always challenged and always working. They don't get a break until you give them a break for the whole class. So those are some of the things that I like about STAR. So the 4 things that we're looking at is the explicit instruction, which is pretty typical for almost everything now. You know, the explanation, the modeling, the guided practice, gradually decreasing the amount of guided practice and teacher implementation, and letting the students apply their own. When you are working on your modules and when you set up your lesson plans, you need to try to think of that those 4 steps to explicit instruction all the time. Okay, it should be part of your vocabulary now. Okay, so that's kind of like the summation of a few things that we missed as we were going through. I wanted to show you a resource in the next module that you have after the reflection, module 25. The trash man is here, and so all the dogs are outside barking at the trash man. Okay, so this is module 25, I'm sorry. And let me go back. I'm going to show you how it looks from the beginning. So this will let you get extra practice in each of these components. And it's really helpful on how they broke them down. So here are more teacher resources, videos, and student materials for each of the 4 components. But I wanted to show you this one because I wanted to point out something that Jane Myers, one of the founders of STAR and CCRS, said about routine. She said, you know, I don't need all the bells and whistles. I want to learn how to read. And this particular video is just a great example of once you get into the routine of teaching STAR, your students know how to do it. They know what they're supposed to be doing. And time becomes freed up for you. One of the greatest conceptions that people have about STAR is that it's going to take so much more time. No, in fact, it will free up some of your time. So I just want you to watch how quickly she gets these students into their next step because they know what they're supposed to be doing.
All right, so we're ready to start the warm-up.
Hold on.
And that means that I need
Can you hear it?
to move over to the...
I'm going to see if I can increase the volume. Okay, I don't think I can increase the volume, but I just want you to watch how quickly she...
long table, and you're going to sit here with 1 or 2 other people like you usually do and take a strip and read the question. The strips have our vocabulary words on them, okay? And the list of vocabulary words is over here on the board to remind you, so you can try to use those words while you're having your discussions. So come on over. Leave your things at your table. Just come and fill in the chairs, and if we have too many people, then we'll make some groups over here. Okay? Yeah, go all the way down, fill all the chairs. Come. Let's see, do we have enough chairs for everybody? Okay, all right. Then I need to, yeah, all right. So here. You guys move down. Anna and Valda move down so that you can sit right here, okay? All right, so now you can be a group. You can have 2 or 3 people in your group, okay? All right, go ahead, talk.
Okay, I don't know if could you hear any of that, but part of it actually didn't even matter. I timed that the first time I watched it. From beginning to end, it was 1 minute and 13 seconds. And she had them into their groove and working on something. So I think it's really important to follow a routine with stars so that they know what's coming next, and it frees up your time. I mean, there isn't a one of us who hasn't experienced 5 to 10 minutes, people shuffling out papers, doing this, doing that. But once they know the routine, you're going to actually have freed up time. Now, one other comment that is usually typical is, I don't have time to do lesson plans for this and this. Don't. Do STAR lesson plans and incorporate your other curriculum as support materials. You don't need 2 sets of lesson plans. The purpose is to teach them reading. It is the most important skill that we can provide them. So you use those curriculum to support what you're doing in STAR. I don't see the point of developing 2 sets of lesson plans, or 3, God forbid. So, okay. So the final things that we always are careful about doing is, of course, we must assess. That's why you spent 10 of the first 30 modules on diagnostic assessments. And then we continue to assess as they go along. And then finally, it's not long chunks of time. I mean, vocabulary, the first day is the longest chunk of time for 30 minutes. But then the rest of them, alphabetics and fluency, are definitely 15 minutes. Comprehension, 25 to 30 minutes, depending on what you're doing. So short lesson time, but numerous lesson opportunities on that skill. Does that make sense to everybody? Any comments on that? Sorry. So as you were writing your modules, please try to get used to using the words of explicit instruction, the whole guided practice, application, modeling, and going from least difficult to most difficult, numerous opportunities. That's the concept of what we're looking for in the modules. And finally, I hope you love the teaching modules. I hope you love them. I consider them a godsend because all of the heavy work had been done for me. I didn't have to figure out correlations between alphabetics and fluency. They already did it for me. 2 years of vocabulary lessons if I need them. So they're very useful. So at this point, now that we have 80% of our technology snafus fixed, fingers crossed, I'm almost afraid to say that. But I want you guys to start exploring the resources tab in STAR because it's all free. Okay, so if there are not any questions, yes, sir.
Sorry, how are those resources going to be, like, our account will stay active for forever? Like, we will always be able to get back into it?
Yes, thank you for asking. They are yours forever. Once you are trained, those resources are yours and the updates are yours, and you can participate in the community of STAR forever. So you can participate in STAR discussion forums, Kansas discussion forums, for as long as you want to. Some people have experienced that, and it's like, who was it? One of you guys had like 2 different, had to like find if you don't remember your password from 10 years ago, we'll just contact the help desk and they'll help you get set up with your new password, email and password. But yes, they're yours forever and they're free. Okay. So now we're going into, if there aren't any more questions or comments. we're going to go into the last part of what we're doing today, which is looking at the next steps. So it will be helpful for you if you can look back and see what your challenges were in Module 5, what your program action team plan was in Module 12, because we're going to be updating and revising those plans. In your handouts, you have a problem-solving template, handout number 7. And when we go into breakout rooms, you guys are going to work through the pros and cons of all your problems and brainstorm. Don't eliminate the problems, brainstorm the problems, and then with each other, you guys are going to figure out solutions. If you are with someone today, you're going to be in that same breakout room, but we want everybody to observe and give feedback to other people. So you're going to be with other people that aren't in your program, obviously. But before we start, I have a short little video to show you to get you into the correct mind thought of what we're doing.
This is the hottest for the season.
Okay. No.
It's a little too busy.
Too purple. Too short. Too hot.
Yeah, that's new.
Okay. I think my mom wore this. This is great. Blue. Where do I sign?
You just did.
Okay, so that wasn't a plug for Cisco, but it was just being used as an example of how the shopping experience has changed. You know, she could move her hand and change different dresses and see how she looks in them. So that's kind of what we want you guys to think of. So I have to read you a short little text. It says, "Congratulations. You have just been appointed as a new store manager. The corporate office wants you to begin to use this new way of shopping in your store. How will you make this new system of shopping work in your existing store?" So when we go into breakout groups, you guys are going to talk about the little shopping cart and the shopping store that we covered in Module 5, but you're going to update it. You're going to see how things changed. In my program, when we started, we didn't do STAR diagnostic assessments, but luckily, because there were 4 of us going through it at the same time, we got the STAR diagnostic assessment started mid-season through for us. But it required, the help of administration, especially the data clerk, to help get this set up. And she is the one who found nice little tricks to help us move along in orientation and enrollment. And it required tweaking and changing as we moved along, even after that, because people left, people leave, and you have to make sure who keeps it running if people leave. Some of you have really good programs who have sustainability. Some of you are starting fresh, and you're going to get some people saying, "Oh, I don't want to change. I like the way we're doing it now." But still, think about this new shopping cart. with the appreciation and understanding that what we're doing is best for the students. We're doing the best for them. So when you go into your breakout rooms, be very, can I say brainstormy? Be very, very generous with your problems, but then also be very generous with your solutions.
Open-minded.
Open-minded. There you go. There you go.
I
So
like,
does everybody?
I like brainstorming though. We're going to add that one to the vocabulary.
Sure. I'm sure it's a vocabulary word somewhere.
Probably tier 3 though.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we professionals use, brainstorming.
Are we ready? Are we ready for the breakout rooms?
Yes. So does everybody have their problem solving template? It's in the handouts. Yeah. It's in the handouts that I emailed to you guys. And it's just a nice little graphic organizer on how to think about problems.
Okay, I'm gonna open up the breakout rooms. Have fun, everybody. Can't go wrong. Okay, Anita, they're all in the rooms.
Okay, so how do I get into the rooms? I go to the more.
No, I do it. I do it. What you want to go to?
Oh, you're
room
gonna
one?
switch me out? Okay, great. Thank you.
Just shoot me a text on the cell phone about when you want to go to a different room.
Okay. All right, we'll do.
So do you want to go just 1, 2, 3 or 3, 2, 1, 2, 3,
1, 2,
1?
3 is fine.
So what is happening? Now the breakout rooms. There was some robust conversations. Where is everybody else at? It's
Did they sneak out of their rooms?
I don't
It gave like a little warning that said that you had to leave that room and go back, but you had to click it, so maybe it took a
Yeah, you had
while.
Here everybody comes. All right. Okay, I think we're all back from the breakout rooms and I have resumed recording.
Alrighty. So we're just going to do this popcorn style, and I want to hear from every program on what you consider a problem and possible solutions or alternatives to that. So let's go through and hear from every program. Who would like to start? Or shall I just do it with the groups, the schedule I went through? Callie and Hutch first.
Our challenge is that several of us are part-time and we're all in different locations, so we don't really get a chance to connect with the other instructors on our team. And I'm also the only one who's trained in STAR, so I guess it isn't like a priority at this point. So one of the things we talked about was having our director go through STAR, and also maybe having some staff meetings or trainings where I could let them know a little bit about how the program works and try to get them excited about utilizing it. So.
Good ideas. Very good. Hutch?
I think getting the assessments done, finding helpers who know how to assess, and then finding the best times to do that. Hopefully, we can get it worked out to where we can have the assessments done before my class time begins. So I would like to do it sometime during orientation or even registration. Because we kind of space those two things out over 2 weeks. So I think that there would be enough time in there. And my other challenge was grouping, because I usually have kind of a small class, usually like maybe seven to 10 nowadays. So my grouping looks more like I have to do something with the advanced, and then kind of everybody else kind of gets grouped in together. So still trying to work out how the logistics of that would work.
So trained, I put it on helpers, so I couldn't think of the right different word, but trained helpers to do the assessments to free you up then. Just focus on, they can then report to you and say, hey, of these 7 or 10 students, they need to be grouped in these ways. So you kind of have a game plan going into the semester. How long would it take to do that? How long would it take to do the assessments, I wonder?
To physically do an assessment or to do the training for an assessment?
Well, we'll get to that part second. Yeah.
They take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, depending on your student.
Because you're right, because after TABE test them, we know, okay, yep.
Yeah, alphabetics and vocab takes about 5 minutes between the two of them. And then fluency and comprehension will take longer. On an average, 30 minutes. And that's ELA. I'm not sure, that's EL. I'm not sure about GED. It's a little bit quicker. Okay. Michelle, did you want to add?
So I'm in with Hutch also, but I'm at the prison setting. So my two challenges are time, because I'm the only one. I do all TABE, all orientation, and teach. And space, because I'm in a very little classroom and there's not free movement. Like we have to depend on the officers to get them out there. So I just, since I can't really group, I try to group by with the materials. They just don't know that they think I'm just handing out different things. And so I'll say, oh, some of you have these words, like for vocabulary. Some of you guys have these words, talk about it. And some of you guys have these words. And then and then sometimes I have I call it a book club. For fluency groups, I call it book club. And so I have book clubs stay a little longer when when math class is over or whatever. I say, okay, so book club, you guys stick around. We're going to read a little bit. Stuff like that. That's how I was solving it.
You mentioned using 2 different sets of vocabulary words. Are you picking and choosing from tier 2 for both groups, or?
Yeah. And I have the old set of STAR vocabulary, the old units, the 36, the 19 units we used to have. And then the new, I love the new that Anita gave us. So yeah.
So just from
It's
the
not
5.
ideal, but that's just how I started solving it for now. But time and planning are the 2 big things to implement something. We're testing next week, and then I'm going to be building a new class session. So I have time to think is there a better way I could do this grouping business?
What were you gonna say, Alicia?
It was about vocabulary words. Oh, well, because so we have, somebody tests at like a 4 and then someone else tests at a 7 or something for vocabulary, but we just have one word bank, or it seems like we can't pick and choose between easy 2-tier words and hard tier 2 words. Or it just kind of seems like here's lesson 1, here's lesson 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't know how to differentiate.
One thing to do is just accept the fact that maybe some of your students will get through matching definition and fill in the blank and maybe sentence completion, but never get to the yes, no, why, and read and respond, or the second or third sentences. So that way you do still only have to use the 1 set, but your more advanced group will have expectations of more. Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes you can Google, if there's somebody who doesn't even need STAR, they're 9th, 10th grade level, you Google advanced vocabulary.
Yes.
PDF or something like that. And so they'll have a whole other thing that isn't even our vocabulary packet. But yeah, I like your idea, Anita.
Okay. WSU and Butler. Who would like to start?
Hi there. So we had a chance to meet, and coincidentally, we have one similar challenge that we both face. And sorry, on my notes I had Barton. I changed it to Butler now. My apologies, Jamie.
I think Barton is right. I was not in your group, and I'm Butler.
I'll change it back to blue. I changed it to purple now. That's going back to blue. Okay. So we had a similar issue, and really the overarching challenges summarizes buy-in from staff and opportunities to train. Much like echoing some of the concerns and challenges is we have a lot of part-time staff who just don't have the time and availability to participate in trainings like this because they either have a full-time job or they just don't have time for this. And furthermore, additional funding. So whether it's budgeted in at the start of the year or whether it's something supplemental that may need a budget modification, we just need to be mindful of that from the operations side. But as far as buying from staff, our possible alternative solution that we came up with was provide additional STAR training opportunities for part-time staff that include synchronous training as well as financial incentives. And so it may, I could just see the floodgates of having, 50 part-time instructors reaching out to Eric and Anita wanting to participate in STAR training, not just because, they're going to get a chance to get formal synchronous training, which is way better than, doing a module on your own time, but being synchronous, being here face to face, and then doing it, formally from Anita. It's much more powerful, and that buy-in is more present. And then as far as the financial incentives, I mean, come on, right? As far as the pros of the solution, part-time staff will receive formal training from STAR, and then STAR pays participants, which will prevent budget modifications from college programs. As far as the cons of the solution, accountability on staff completing training on their own time, and then funding sustainability from STAR, because if we do have a plethora of educators wanting to participate in STAR and that financial incentive is there, how deep is the bucket, if you will, and and those were our what we discussed. Jamie, Dan, what did I leave out? I know we talked about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for at least for that first issue. We didn't really get to the second issue.
Anita, do you want to hear our other challenges? Martin had a second challenge, and then WSU Tech, we had a different one.
Yeah, sure, that would be good.
Okay. To Dan's point, we didn't get a chance to dive into that, but Barton, too large a variety of levels within a class. So may have a foundations to an advanced class, and then for WSU Tech, issues and timely implementation. So just trying to find the time to best use and implement STAR training.
And do all the assessments. I counted about 200 students around the intermediate level, which comes out to about 100 hours. And that's if it's back to back to back to back to back, which I'm sure would be at least 20% longer than that.
Now, one thing that we did, because yes, staff does move on, do move on, but for those who still worked at the college, they came and helped do STARS just on a voluntary basis, the diagnostic assessments. So if you can keep in contact with formally trained STAR people to help with the assessments, that might help a little bit. But yes, the first time that we implemented STAR, I did 60, November through December. Not the best solution, because they had to spend, my students had to take time out of their work schedule before class, after class. Not the best solution. Yeah, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. Maybe
it would seem if we could just do the diagnostic on some of them and maybe skip the comprehension part of it,
yeah,
that would save a lot of time.
that's right, Dan. When I go through that's a really good point, Dan. If I go through a diagnostic assessment and they don't get an 8+ in the first 3, you cannot do the comprehension at that point. So just stop it, just for time's sake, until you get ahead of that big chunk of people.
Yeah.
Because that follows them. You don't have to do diagnostic assessments every year. So when that person, through teacher, practitioner observation, is ready to move on, do that comprehension assessment, to move them on. That diagnostic assessment is in their folder. It follows them. Jamie, for the too many levels in one class, yes, that one is hard. Your next module is going to be on instructional routine, on how to balance that. Like maybe one person doing phonics while another person is doing comprehension. But yeah, That's a lot of levels for one class. Any other suggestions for Jamie on her levels in one class?
I mean, the only suggestion, the only thought I had, if space allows, and if there's like a volunteer as well, would be to have certain levels of students, pull them out, and conduct a a brief exercise with those specific level students, and then come back and then take the advanced students and so on and so forth. I know we're doing that currently with different software with Reading Horizons. Although damage and that it can be hit or miss if it's not implemented correctly. But I mean, with having so many levels, I'm sure that's got to be difficult, Jamie.
Yeah, that's the dream. That's the dream position where you've got these retired English teachers coming in and helping with your fluency groups. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So, some
Go
marketing
ahead.
flyers for a retirement home. I don't know. That's
Well, there you go.
I tried doing that before, and I got one. I had a chance to get one volunteer. She was great.
And maybe like high school seniors who have to do community service for graduation or a college class.
Ymir, is there a senior center in your town?
There's a couple of them. There's a couple of senior centers around Wichita, and I've had success with that. I've also I've gone to convent where a lot of nuns congregate, and I've had some success there as well. A lot of them are tied to education, and I try to do whatever I can to to find some volunteers and find qualified instructors.
Excellent. I love that idea. All righty. Hannah.
Yes.
How about you?
So truly, like our biggest challenge is just getting students who are committed and see the process through. And so Valisha and I were talking, and we both have some students who the situation is maybe that their mom or dad say that they have to be there, or they are mandated by an officer or something to be there. And that is a tricky thing to navigate when like you're supposed to be, teaching the material, but you also have to try and teach them what the value is, I guess, ahead of time when they're pretty resistant to it. And so we really do struggle with students who are pretty flighty, like, oh, I can't come because of this, or I'm going to be late or whatever. And that's hard to have a class and to work together. And I don't know that there's a right answer for how to address that, but it certainly does present challenges for being able to see things through all the way.
Yeah, because they wouldn't be in your GED classes if they hadn't lacked a certain process in high school already, right?
Right.
So you start with an inherent obstacle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, we certainly have some who come in who are very, very eager, but and I guess we are fortunate in that some of the community connections that we have made is that we do have officers who, mandate students to be there. I mean, the officers know the value. The parents of those students who don't want to be there, they obviously know the value. So it's not that it's not important for those students to be there, but the students are the ones who, are providing that challenge. It's not the people who are working on their behalf.
So what does everyone think about that? I loved the different approach to this particular idea, because we're talking motivation, and to me You know, it's like you want to make a deal with them almost. It's like, okay, you don't want to be here. So let's focus so very hard for the next 3 months to get you through these GED tests. So you commit to STAR and the process of learning these skills so you can test and get out of here.
Sure.
But with the 16-year-old, that's still not going to help sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, and what I always say is, you know, like, all I'm asking is for your best. I promise to you that I will give you my best, you know, and I will modify, I will try to help in any way that I can so that it allows for your learning. But yeah, if they're there because of somebody else forcing them to be there, essentially, yeah, that's a hard one to overcome.
And what happens, I mean, to me, that just seems like an inevitable process that you're gonna have fallout.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Does anyone have solutions on this one? It's student motivation. That's.
I have one currently, and I don't think it matters anything I say as far as trying to motivate, but I have noticed that the more I ask of him one-on-one or in small groups, like when he's forced to participate, he'll participate. So I think having those smaller groups and having that that expectation that he's going to have to give an answer, that's like the only thing that I've ever had really work in that situation.
And I definitely agree with that. I do feel like when I am able to work in those small groups or one-on-one, you know, if I ask the question and they choose not to answer, it's going to be a very long and awkward silence for them to endure. I'm willing. And so if, you know, I can establish like that, okay, we're going to work on this together, it definitely is more effective. I think just that's hard because a lot of times we're doing meetings virtually because of the service area that we cover and, you know, time constraints and all of that. We're trying to really provide an opportunity to get as many people as we can. So that's just tricky when, you know, like, how do you provide an opportunity for the other students to do something else while you virtually work one-on-one? And I suppose like it's something we'll get better at, but it definitely, I find it difficult at this point to make it useful time for everyone when I'm trying to go that route.
Hannah, you mentioned like the awkward silence thing. I think that one of the big things I've learned is like that a lot of the people who come in, at least in Salina, a lot of the people who come into our services are people with an undiagnosed learning disability. And so like one that fascinates me the most is processing speed disorder, because I mean I'm sure we've all seen it, but it just absolutely fascinates me because like you see somebody who you say something like you say something to them and then their brain, like you can literally see their eyes just indicating the brain is just buffering for like 3 seconds. And then and like some of those people that have processing speed disorder, it's like the only thing that is holding you back at all. We had one lady who we got her a screening and she got diagnosed with processing speed disorder. And when they looked at her assessment results or whatever from the screening, she was like average or above average in everything except for the processing speed disorder. We got her in there through the accommodations and everything, got GED accommodations set up, and she was getting like GED scores in the 160s and 170s. once we got her the processing speed thing. And so it's like I've become so aware of that kind of thing that like for me it feels like an awkward silence, but I might know if I have one or two students in the room that's got a processing speed disorder, then for me it's awkward silence. For them it's just existence. It's a weird thing. I'm not saying that's what's happening with you, and I'm not trying to sound like a know-it-all. I'm just trying to say I've learned like the value of mentally twiddling my thumbs, you know.
Well, let me think on that, and let's try to get some more resources for you. That one's a hard one to approach, and you know, maybe just longevity is the solution. Felicia, how about I'm saying that that's such a hard one. I don't have really good suggestions for you at this point. But let me
That's
think
okay.
on that.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect.
I'm going to contact Star National people.
Sounds good. Thank you.
One of them will have better ones. They always do. Felicia, how about you?
So I would say my biggest challenge is kind of a combination of what's been discussed with Hannah and Jamie. Working in small groups is a great idea, but when you have a group of pretty young, immature 16 and 17-year-olds who are not always the most highly motivated, I can't bounce from group to group. The minute I turn my back on this group, they're on their phones or, you know, doing whatever. I have no idea. Sometimes wrestling in the college lobby, which that was fun. So, you know, it's kind of like I see the value in theory, but in practice, it's just been so difficult to implement. And so recently I tried to stagger our schedules so I could separate a few of the more students who are more problematic for one another. And that was somewhat successful, but then I feel like we waste so much time trying to transition, you know, as this group is kind of moving here and this group is coming here. Well, then everybody has to use the restroom. Well, they don't really, but they say they do, you know, so it's like, well, kind of solved a problem, but then added an additional one. So that's been my biggest challenge.
Okay, I'm sending your group's stuff on to the national because I have a few tactics, but you need strategy.
Yeah, I mean, in the midst of all of that, so you have your different STAR groups, but then you also have the students who are not appropriate for STAR, you know, who don't need some of the same interventions. And so trying to manage all of the different groups and their needs while still trying to manage their behavior has been super hard.
Teacher of the year there.
I think that indicates I am not the teacher of the year.
No, it indicates you are a teacher of the year because you're still doing it.
My classes, my STAR levels are really good about putting my buddies in the same group of young kids, like my young teenagers that are, you know, they've befriended each other and now they're in the same STAR group. So then it's like, guys, this isn't social time. Like we need to stay focused, but they think, oh, we gotta go do our small group together and it's me and my friend. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, let's
yes,
focus.
to that too. Absolutely.
That's a very interesting. That's a large group of people this year with that age group also. All right, my friends, we must move on, but thank you very much. Eric and I have both written down copious notes. I would love to see your handout. If you can just email me your results, if you have more extensive written problems and solutions written on your handout. Okay, so you have at this point completed module 24, face-to-face with me. Now, you cannot move on to module 25 until you are green module 16 through 23. So 23 is the gatekeeper to the last modules you need to complete, just like before. And so you think to yourself, wow, I only have 5 modules left. I can do this. Yes, you can, but time is critical on this last one. So if you look at your handout 8 on next steps, what's next for you? These are actually going to take longer than you think. So you guys like really need to jump on this like today or next week. You need to set up a meeting with your director and with all previous STAR participants for a program team action planning meeting, where you are not only going to review your module 5 and module 12, you're going to review theirs, and you're going to come up with an institutional systemic plan for implementing diagnostic assessment and for implementing STAR instruction into your program. And so many people are so busy. So before you let this get away from you, you need to email me quickly on when you have set up a team action planning meeting, okay? Thumbs up. I'm looking for commitment on this one because it's going to take longer than you think. The next thing that I am hoping that some of you will greatly benefit from, because most of you are at the point where you're trying to establish a more cohesive instructional routine. So module 27 is going to show you how to do that. It's going to help you set up instructional routines of time and groups varying from 15 to 25 minutes, you know. So I'm hoping that you will benefit from that. So you need to do and practice instructional routine before modules 28 and 29. So what's going to happen in module 28 is that you need a coach. Someone is going to come in and observe you teach vocabulary or teach alphabetics, teach fluency, teach comprehension, whatever it is. They're going to come in and observe you. This is not a teacher evaluation. They aren't going to be harsh and critical. They're going to give you constructive criticism on what you can do to improve your STAR instruction. So if there are 2 of you and you have to find coaches and time, this might take you a month to do. Module 28 might literally take, modules 28 and 29 might take you a month to set up. So you guys really need to set up a schedule so that you can make sure that you can get your coaches in to observe you. I need to know who your coach is, because they will be let onto your dashboard so that they will literally type in what they observed, what they suggest, next steps for you. So I need to know their name and their email so that they can be put into your dashboard. Okay? Does everybody understand that?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
For those of us who maybe teach on Zoom, if we were to do this, if we were to record our class, would it be okay to record the class and send it to the coach? Does the coach necessarily have to be there in the room at the same time, or can we record the class and send it to them and have them watch it and post?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I think that would be okay, Michael, because they're not going to interrupt your teaching. You know, they're just there to observe. So, but for timeliness sake, if you can try to get them just to schedule to come in and observe you over Zoom as you're doing it live, it's going to help with the time. This can really drag out for a month, just trying to get your instruction time and the coach's time coalesced. The coach has to put it into your dashboard. It has to be approved and so on and so forth. So, you know, just send out an SOS and say, hey, I need a coach who can observe me teach STAR. here are the times that I'm teaching. Can someone do this? Okay. Because they have to put it into yours. And so basically you are held hostage until that coach gets your stuff put into module 29. You can't move forward until the coach gets the stuff into module 29. And it's good and helpful. And most of your program directors who are not brand new, like Dan and Ymir, they've all done it. And all of you have program people hopefully still there who have coached. You just need to ask them to set up a schedule. So you're setting up a schedule for your program action planning and setting up a schedule for someone to observe you to coach. And that schedule for coaching needs to be done after you have watched and set up your instructional routine, which is module 27. That's where it kind of all coalesces. You've been doing vocabulary, you've been doing comprehension, alphabetics, fluency. Now you're looking at your routine. So even though basically you have 4 modules left, the time might really get to be a crunch. You know, we've got KAEA, COABE, GED graduations, enrollment. So if you guys can nail down a program planning meeting and nail down coach's observations. Now, if you have partners, you guys can actually coach each other, but you also might want to ask your director or another person to come in and observe. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So the coach has to be someone that has completed STAR or is currently in STAR. Is that my understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you can't find one, I can certainly be on Zoom and observe you and submit a coaching feedback for you also. But most of you have people around there that have done it. I think, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that all of you still have quite a few people that have gone through it. So
if it turns into a thing like I can't find somebody, reach out to Anita and myself, and we'll take care of you.
Yeah, for sure. So module 30 is where you submit your final team meeting plan on how you are moving diagnostic assessments and the instruction of STAR into your program, not just on teachers' shoulders, but program. After you complete that, they're going to send you a little 5-minute survey again. After you have submitted module 30, they'll send you a little post survey. Once that has been completed, you are certified. And then at that point, Eric gets to send a congratulations and money. All right, my friends, I hope that you guys really enjoyed teaching STAR. The teaching is so much more fun than all that technology jazz we went through.
Will the recording, where can we access the recording from today, Anita?
Eric recorded everything.
Well, I wouldn't say the word everything, because there was a couple of times where I forgot to hit recording. But Michael, the answer to that, it'll be in Go Learn. I'll get that in there in the Go Learn resource repository before the end of next week.
Okay, thanks.
Anita, are you handing the ball back to me now? Is this me wrap up moment?
Uh-huh.
Everybody, appreciate you taking your time on a Friday. A lot of good discussion, a lot of good back and forth and helping each other. Really appreciate that. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and look forward to seeing you at KAEA if those of you are going to be there. Otherwise, keep plugging along at with your modules. Again, do that homework outside of class, but do implement in class. Try the strategies. See what works. See what doesn't work. And maybe, pivot. It's all about the pivot. But in seriousness, what you do on a daily basis to help our students is greatly appreciated. Thank you for what you do. So if we could please have Ymir and Dan stay on the Zoom call. Everybody else, great job, everybody.
Bye, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nita. Thanks, Eric.
Give me a second.